Hello, 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 and welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to IBGR network, known as the International Business Growth Radio Network. I'm your host, Crystal Y. Davis, and today do I have a special show for you. I wish you could see us on Zoom because we're on Zoom as well as live on the radio. But before we get there, I'm Crystal Y. Davis, your host today in the operations lane here at the Lead Lean Show. And today we're going to be talking about my favorite subject, lean, but not just lean and lean tools and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about lean systems and how it relates to manufacturing system design, starting from where the costs are already factored in, and that is the product design. Boy, listen, I think I'm going to need some help today staying on task because I'm going to have two of my long-term colleagues from Delphi on with me. So when you get Delphi alums together and we talk lean, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? So before we get started, I have to thank my sponsor. My sponsor, of course, is my company, The Lean Coach Incorporated, a boutique consultancy focused on helping manufacturing and supply chain companies become resilient and agile as a result of the pandemic. All right, so let me jump in here and get started. And I want to start with introductions, and we get all of the the formal things out of the way, and I can jump right into this topic. All right, so first up is Matt Zako. Matt is an executive lean leader with GE Hitachi Nuclear Energy and former president of his own management consultancy, a longtime senior coach with LEI, Lean Enterprise Institute, for 15 years. And after spending the first 12 years of his career in a variety of staff and management level roles under the former Toyota mentors for Gelman, Sciences, Delphi, and Paul, now Danaher. He has over 25 years of experience in leading enterprise improvements in numerous industries by helping to transform product development, engineering, manufacturing, service processes, and other areas. Matt has supported organizations as a globally recognized expert in process development. And Matt recently co-authored the book, what we're going to talk about today, The Power of Process, a story of innovative lean process development, with none other than Eric Ethington, who's also my former Delphi colleague. And we'll introduce Eric shortly. Matt has authored numerous other works based on successful transformation, including articles that have been published in the Journal of Quality Engineering, IIE Solutions, Journal of Cost Management, and a chapter in the 1998 Shingo Prize-winning book, Becoming Lean, as well as white papers for the Lean Enterprise Institute. Matt received his MS in Industrial and Operations Engineering from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. Matt, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks, Crystal. It's an honor to be here with you.
Awesome. All right, and then we have Eric Ethington. Eric, I love this part. Eric has a pragmatic approach for lean with over 35 years of work experience at Delphi, Textron, and his company Lean Shift. He has been fortunate to learn about the science and methods of improvement from some of the best teachers available while working with highly capable teams in industries such as automotive, aerospace, defense, healthcare, medical devices, energy, and logistics. Eric holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering from Kettering University, formerly GMI, and an MBA in Operations from the University of Michigan, the Flint campus. He earned a Six Sigma Design Black Belt while working at Textron. He serves on the board of directors at Goodwill Industries of Mid-Michigan, as well as the Alumni Advisory Board for the Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering Department at Kettering University. Most recently, Eric has co-authored, of course, the book that we're going to talk about today, The Power of Process, a story of innovation, lean process development with his longtime colleague, of course, who I've already introduced, and that is Matt. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Eric. So good to have you.
Hey, Crystal, and it's good to be here. Been looking forward to talking with you again.
Listen, I am super excited about this opportunity. First of all, you got 3 industrial engineers in the room and 3 Delphi people who learn Delphi manufacturing systems. So, I'm super excited about this book. I know, of course, why you guys wrote the book, but can we start out with you telling the audience about what inspired you to write this book?
So this will be the awkward part of this, is having 2 people to interview, and we're both way too polite. So
don't be polite.
I'll just jump in here. One of the key things was that we just go to so many different organizations, and even organizations that have been working on lean for decades. And when you go out into their Gemba, their factory, or where they produce their value, you are sometimes kind of befuddled about the lack of basic processes out there and the lack of understanding of basic processes. And so on one hand, it's like we've been doing lean for a long time, but on another hand, the actual evidence isn't out there. And it just feels like there's a big opportunity to get people to start to think about this and start to think about it up front, instead of trying to keep fixing problems and then having the next generation of the process have those problems embedded in it again. And then I'll let Matt fill in what I may have missed at that point.
Yeah, no, Eric, I think summed it up well, but just I'd like to also add, a key learning for us over the years has been, the saying 80% of the cost is on the print, right? And, and what is meant by that, you touched on it earlier, Crystal, that 80% of the value, the waste, the cost is usually locked in when product design is set, the process is selected, and in traditional accounting terms, that doesn't view that way, but the reality is that's what happens. And 80% of the cost gets incurred in operations typically, and that's where a lot of the efforts start. And it's a great place to start. But Eric and I were just frustrated that more companies weren't pushing upstream more into the process design and product design. And we hope the book helps open up some eyes and gets people to see the opportunity that is there.
Wow. So, it's interesting that you both recognize that. And I think that for me, I can say that was also something I learned working at Delphi. But would you not say that the majority of people believe that the process improvement opportunities happen on the shop floor, and that's where people really believe that it should happen?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna fault them for that, because it's where it's easy to see. You can go out and see the process, you can see the work, you can see what looks normal, what doesn't look normal. You can see all that rework, that scrap, that inventory, all those things. But at the same time, those are the result of a product and process design that was implemented. And again, what we're trying to get people to think about is all of that good work out in the factory floor is absolutely necessary, but could there be some work done up front to allow the teams to focus on even more advanced stuff, more higher levels of improvement? We personally had this happen to us several times at several different companies, where you got this energized plant team, they're out doing some great stuff, and they're about to maybe take a certain line to the next level. And then over on the other side of the plant, a new line launches, and it's a disaster. And so instead of taking this one that they've really been working on to the next level, it's all hands on deck at the other end of the plant. And you get over there, and the problems you find are problems that had been solved already. It's here it comes back again.
Listen, when I read that part in the book, I said, I just had a flashback back to my industrial engineering days at Delphi. And I was like, this is the epitome of silo management. You've got two teams working completely separate from one another, all good people, all striving to deliver on whatever task and project or responsibility needed, but not really having the improvements correlate over to your point, to the new line, or even to the engineers who A, design the product, and B, design the manufacturing system design. So can you talk a little bit about, and we'll jump into the 6-con process when we come into segment 2, but really quickly, can you talk a little bit about, in those instances and in the book, how are you driving cultures to see that this silo gap, or how to converge upon this silo gap and eliminate some of that, I'll say the silo wall?
I'll take a crack at this. I think one of the first challenges, Crystal, is to, there's in any problem solving cycle or opportunity cycle is the realization that there's a gap there or a problem, right? And one thing Eric and I have done with organizations or just individuals is talked about failure modes that occur with process development. So that's one opportunity to get people to try to understand the gap that's there. And we talk about 3 common failure modes. Just, too much too early is one of them, penny wise, pound foolish, and too little too late. And so we have examples of that, and we challenge people to think about current situations, recently launched products and processes where that evidence is there. So that's one way to help, I think, get people to open their eyes and see that these problems are there, and then try to get them to quantify what was the cost, what was the lost value, lost opportunity in trying to right those situations, and they're usually very significant. So
Absolutely. One of the flashbacks that I had was when I was working as an industrial engineer. I felt like we were so far down the runway with what we needed to launch. We were up against the clock, but then I wanted to have gone back and made those changes, and I was happy that I had that opportunity on a next opportunity in another plant that I worked in. But I think to your point, it's the realization that there is a gap and the willingness to take a step back, right? So we have to take a really quick break. We'll be back after this break. I'm going to continue to talk to Matt and Eric on Zoom. So those of you that see this on LinkedIn, you can catch up with us. You've been listening to IBGR.network. We'll be back after this very short break. All right, welcome back. We apologize for our first segment having a few glitches. It looked like we had some issues with the mic going in and out, perhaps because we're on 2 platforms here. However, we are back. Welcome back. You've been listening to IBGR.network, known as the International Business Growth Radio Network. I am your host, Crystal Y. Davis, here at the Lead Lean Show. And today I have the special privilege of having some former Delphi colleagues and new co-authors of their book, The Power of Process, a story of innovative lean process development, Eric Ethington and Matt Zako. So welcome back, guys. Welcome back. So we left off just kind of giving a little intro about the book and how you're literally taking people to the front end of the process, where it starts with product design, and then understanding how much cost is tied up, how much operational cost is truly tied up in the product design process, and correlating that to what we at Delphi used to call the manufacturing system design. And I love in the book how you have referenced your framework, the 6-con method. And so I'm going to talk a little less, and I want you guys to just talk to us about what the 6-con process is and how that helps people to really understand how they can take elements of the framework and implement it in their process, in their operations.
So Matt, let's split this up. Why don't you start with the first 3 and I'll do the final 3. How's that?
Matt, you've gotten to go twice, go first,
That's
twice
right.
in one day.
That's right. The Zako, the Z gets to go first. I appreciate that. So yeah, so the 6 con model. So I'll just kind of take it back a step. There's kind of 3 high-level phases without getting into the cons. Yeah, the kind of 3 high-level phases to development. If you think of it as kind of discovery, study, there's a discovery phase, a study phase, / you can also call it a learning phase, and then execution. So the 6 con model, the cons refer to each of the words. The first 3 letters all start with con, C-O-N. So that's how we have it as a nice little break. So I will go through the first 3 that are primarily in the study phase or learning phase of the model. So again, from a high level discovery and learning, or the first kind of 2 phases, and then execution. Eric will talk more on the execution. The last 3 cons are primarily in there. And they're meant as frames or lenses to really to look at. They're not supposed to be in a sequence because you can go backwards and go forwards. But the first con is context. And what that is it's understanding all the key inputs, voice of the customer. If you have a new process that you need to design, where does this fit in the value stream? So all these contextual elements that you need to have to know, what's in scope, out of scope, what your boundaries are, right? Making everything very clear, but also understanding where you have big knowledge gaps or risks and trying to understand those early and close those during this early learning phase. So that's what the context helps do, is just frame it up, that lens. And then after context, you go into what we call concepts. This is where we want you to almost use a set-based approach, develop multiple options. And in our early experiences, sometimes people would just select something they thought was the best design and push it through the system. So we've learned that that's not a good approach. So what we want to do is come up with multiple concepts. And this isn't a 7 ways idea generation phase. It's more than that. It's going through a you can do the 7 ways one time and jump to 1, but in this concept phase, you're going, you can develop 7, you can develop 4, you can steal from each other, but as you go into the next phase after concepts, it's converge. So this concepts and converge kind of work together. You'll come up with multiple options or ideas, narrow it down. There may even be a divergence that goes on, but this converge phase is you're narrowing it down to what you think is the best option, looking at the product design, the process design, the operation you're going in, the customer. Obviously, it's like a giant Venn diagram, and you want to find that sweet spot in the middle. So when you want to converge down to that optimal space and come up with what you think is the best option. But this whole phase of learning that you've gone through, you've also generated new learning and new ideas that you can also put on the shelf for maybe future product generations going forward. So there's tremendous knowledge gaps that you're closing, but also identifying that you can quantify for later on. So this learning phase is really, 2 purposes: to minimize risk and identify that best process that you need to have to meet the customer needs, the operational needs, and the commercial needs, but also to identify, from a competitive advantage, new learning that you can leverage in the future. So there's that piece of it. So again, it's kind of summarize the first 3 cons in the model: context, concepts, and converge. So I'll turn it over to Eric now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry I did that to you, Matt, but just keeping us moving along. So then the one that comes after that's configure. So now that we've down selected and we've got, okay, here's the idea we're going to move forward with, or the actual concept that we're going to move forward with. In configure, that's when you actually get into a lot of the detailed design. As far as in some of those earlier phases, you might run some experiments, you might do some rough mock-ups, but when you get into configure, you're thinking about material flow, information flow. In fact, we almost called the chapter Configure and Connect, if you can imagine that, like add in a 7th con, right? It's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. Plus, it's really hard to talk about one without talking about the other. If you do it right? And that's usually one of the failure modes, is we configure a layout, but we don't think about the information flow and the impact that has on the materials and the lot sizes and how the manufacturing system or the system ultimately comes together. And so, but this is where you get into all that detail work. The next phase after that is confirm. And that's when you start, and confirm really starts as equipment is being built, run off, early installation. Confirm is doing some test runs, some experiments on this system that's going in, but thinking of it not as, oh, does my machines work, or does my cell work, or my manufacturing system work, but you're really testing the value stream. Can you put a signal in and get the right parts to show up, the right thing to get made, and it to be packaged, labeled properly, and end up at the right dock door location? You know, you're testing the whole value stream, and you do that over time as more and more of the system comes together. And one of the key things about Configure is you have some objective ways of measuring success. Ultimately, your success metrics 90 days after, I'm just kind of picking this number, but it could be 90 days, it could be 30 days, it depends on your industry and so on. But sometime after start of production, are you hitting your cost targets, your quality targets, your delivery targets, and so on? So in Confirm, you have, like, I might call it like the canary in the coal mine type metrics of, am I going to hit my delivery target, or am I going to hit my cost target? And there's other measures you might have that are proxies of the ultimate measures of success once the start of production happens. The final con is continuous improvement, which is kind of where the whole conversation started, right? In fact, it was kind of funny. We were trying to figure out what to call it, and my wife's like, well, what about continuous improvement? We're looking for something that started with, yeah. And so that was just kind of a funny story. We were too deep into our topic to step back and go look at the obvious. But the reality is that you're never going to launch a perfect process, so there's always opportunity to improve it. But the other thing is the world's always changing, the environment's always changing, your volumes and mixes are changing, product designs are changing, there's always change, right? So that's where we would really want the really great continuous improvement resources out there to be focused on, is how to take really good and make it great, not how to take what we've already done before and get it as good as we're already doing, just get us back up to par. And so those are the 6 cons. And as Matt mentioned, they're kind of, we sometimes call them like frames or lenses to just look at the development, the process development through those lenses, just to get the team to focus on the right general things at the right time.
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys explaining it. For me, there are a couple of things that stood out for me. One is you have broken down, in Delphi we used to always say thinking is required, right? You have essentially broken down in these 6 phases or lenses, a way to help people be able to see the whole without it being an emotional kind of approach. So when I read through this originally before published, thank you guys for inviting me to do that. But what I thought about was, this to me is the key to being able to tear down those silo walls, because if you think about it, people can see how they fit into each of those phases. Going back to Matt's point, it takes a courageous group to admit that they have a gap. However, if you acknowledge that you have a gap in that first phase of context, then from there it gets easier. What tends to happen is people start at that CI level and want to go backwards, and you've got so much invested. You've now got hurt feelings because people have designed something or done something that you're now saying isn't effective or doesn't work well. So I felt like, when I read this, I was like, this is truly something that, to your point, if we had 20 years ago, maybe we wouldn't have had as many frustrations, because the most difficult thing is that cultural piece of getting people to acknowledge that there's a gap and be willing to take a step back and then walk this roadmap forward and be able to do it in a collaborative manner. That to me was the beauty that I saw in the 6-con process. So I never shared that with you guys, but that's what I saw. Like, everyone can engage. So when we come back from our next break, which we're about to take in a minute, I want to talk about how you, in the book, you reference the teams and how the teams can work together around this model. And that's kind of how I felt like, oh, even if I were on the design side, I see where I fit in. Even if I were on the manufacturing side, I see where I fit in. Even if from a leadership perspective, I see where I fit in. If I were on the continuous improvement team, I see where I fit in. And that is, to me, the beauty of the model. So we're going to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, as I mentioned, we're going to talk teams. And then I think we probably should explain to the people thinking is required. That was ingrained and etched in our brains at Delphi. So, all right, listen, folks, I'm having a ball today. I hope you are too. With my guests, Eric Ethington and Matt Zako. You have been listening to the Lead Lean Show here at IBGR. We'll be back after this very short break. Welcome back. Welcome back. You're listening to IBGR.network, known as the International Business Growth Radio Network. I'm your host, Crystal Y. Davis of the Lead Lean Show, where we talk operations. And today I have the great pleasure of having on the show two guests, two long-term colleagues of mine, Eric Ethington and Matt Zako. And we are talking about their new book, The Power of Process, a story of innovative lean process development. Now, I know for some of you business owners, you might be thinking, oh, what's this lean stuff? But I want you to think about, you know, for any product that you manufacture or any product that you sell, it starts from a place of design. And so in order for you to deliver quality product on time at the right cost to your customer and at the right cost for you to make profit, these topics that we're talking about really matter. So, you know, even if you don't understand some of the lean lingo, just hang around and understand conceptually why it's important to break down silo walls, why it's important to have a process that allows everyone from ideation of concept to the actual delivery of a product to a customer to see how they fit into this product, into this process. And then as you as a CEO, COO leader, how you can steer teams in the right direction to make sure that they are definitely thinking about how to minimize waste in the process, how to drive productivity and efficiency, and how to bring problems to the surface before they become long-term operational problems. So guys, welcome back. Welcome back. I really appreciate you for breaking down the 6COM model and making a model that's so easy for, I think, easy for people to actually understand and see every step of the process through, and why it's so important to focus on product development when you're focused on designing your manufacturing system. I mentioned a term in there that we know well from Delphi, and I think we should probably explain that to folks and how that fits into the model. So I can recall every presentation, every training document, it didn't end with, do you have questions? It ended with the last slide saying, thinking is required. And when I read that in the book, I was just, you know, it's like, these are my people. These are my people. So when you think about that 6COM model, you know, context, concept, converge, configure, confirm, and continuous improvement. Why is that phrase so important? Thinking is required. What does it really mean to you guys?
One of the risks we took actually as we wrote the book is it, as you know, you've read it, it's a story. It's written as a story. And so there's a lot of engineers out there, including ourselves, that don't have long attention spans. And they're like, give me the list, give me the checklist, give me cut to the chase. Don't give me the story. And we originally started writing and it was without story. And it started sounding very dogmatic. Like you go through these 6 cons and you do this in each thing. And so we really wanted 2 things: for people to see themselves in the story. Now, not everyone's going to find themselves in the story, but we've got enough experience between us in years that we've seen a lot of different situations. And so we tried to write so that people could see themselves in the story. But we also, instead of saying, here's what your early, early indicator metric should be for your project or your product, which we have no clue about, right?
Right.
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 That wouldn't be right to say that these are the early indicator metrics. We take them through the thinking that a team having a conversation about this might go through, so that, okay, you can at least see the logic that leads to some of this stuff. And so we just thought it was so important because everybody has their own unique current state, and that current state will be changing. And so you have to kind of think your way through these things. Now pause there.
Anything to add there, Matt?
Well, and I think to just reinforce Eric was saying too, it's a technical, the social and technical system bits to this, and the book, we were very easily covering the technical aspects of it.
Yes.
But it's the social aspects that actually are the harder part. How do you engage with people? How do you cajole people? How do you persuade people, right, to do things that they're not comfortable with? And that's the hard part with a lot of change, right? Change management. And
Absolutely.
so, by bringing a story into the book, I think it really helped show that challenge that most of us face. And as Eric said, it's applicable to any, whether you're designing a new hospital, a clinical, process, any type of situation. So, and that the human part of it is so important. So,
Absolutely. That was another thing that I really appreciated, because I can recall my early days in Lean. I was very dogmatic. I was that Lean person. We just have to focus on the task. I was the ultimate taskmaster. And my development as a Lean practitioner came when I started learning how to manage the social impact. And I love, there was one point in the book where as you were telling this story, and you were telling what people's thoughts were. Not that they were saying these things out loud. And so I had this vision that I was facilitating this Kaizen, and I see people's body language, but it's kind of like those cartoons where, like, the animals talk. You're like, wonder what they're thinking that they're not saying. But that is so important to be able to change and influence culture, is to understand that you can't just be dogmatic. You can't just focus on the technical side. And you have to really pay attention to what people are experiencing, whether it's fear, whether it's resistance to change, whether it's, they're a fact finder and they just need more information. You have to just meet people where they are. And I love how you brought that out in the story. Speaking of the social aspect, one other thing that I really appreciated is that in the story is that you talked about these two teams, and you started at the top of the organization. Why was that important for you to identify the teams and then identify those particular roles on the team in the story?
Take this one, Matt.
Well, I'll start, and then I want Eric, obviously, his really great influence on this as well. But just, I think, a couple comments. One, a lot of companies have done great things in the past, like set up, whether it's a new product challenge or a new process, and usually that's called a skunk work, like a skunk works team is set up, right? It's a special SWAT team, tiger teams,
Right.
all these different names for things, right? And everyone's done those things. So we've seen those things. They don't sustain themselves, right? And you can create a one-off great product, but so the challenge with this and what we experienced as engineers was, you have to have the leadership engagement, commitment, support, to not just have it be a one-off skunk work. We want it to be standard work, right? So think of it, skunk work versus standard work. And when I say standard work, it's standard work in a positive way, a repeatable routine that the organization can do for all new process developments going forward. So and to be able to do that in the book, there's two challenges. One is they needed to figure out how to do it one time, right? This working team. And then the larger challenge for the leadership team was, how do they do this every time going forward? And that's really the people development part, right? How do they scale up the capacity and capability of the organization? So that was the piece of that. And I'll turn it over to Eric, because he can add more depth to this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you covered it quite well. It's, there's kind of two problems to solve: the problem of developing the new process, and then the problem of developing the new process of process development, which is kind of a mouthful there. But the other thing is that as that working level team is developing the new process, things aren't going to go according to plan. They're going to run into roadblocks. They're going to need help. They need someone to be able to escalate to for support. And so you do need that leadership team there as the escalation. At the same time, what we tried to illustrate is this is an uncomfortable space for the leadership teams too, because this is new. They didn't get to that level of leadership necessarily by the practices that we're looking for them to do. And so they're out of their comfort zone too. And so let's just admit that, and then say, okay, we're all figuring this out together, and let's figure it out together, versus everybody worrying about, oh, how am I going to be perceived, and so on. So we really did try to demonstrate that too. And one of the final things I'll add is we very deliberately wrote human resources into the leadership team, because that organization, tapped well, can be the let's just say the feedback to the executive team on, here's what I saw happening, here's what I saw happen with the behaviors in the room when you did that. Provide some actual leadership coaching, and also to think about one thing a lot of organizations don't think about enough is career paths for folks that get into this type of work. What are you going to do with them? How do you actually create a career path for them? Because if you don't, they will find a career path, but it'll be somewhere else.
It'll be somewhere else, right?
And so let's think about those things up front. People will find a career path.
Oh, Eric, Matt, listen, you guys have touched on here so many things again, that took me back to my own career, but I appreciate how you illustrated that because you're in a position of leadership, that you don't have to have all the answers, that you can be it's okay to be in a learning mode and not be perceived as less authoritative or powerful, or being capable of being in your position. And that was one of the things that I thought came out in the story. And I also think that for companies, well, I keep going back to Delphi, but I think that was one of the things that helped us be successful at Delphi, was that the leaders were learning with us. So we were all learning together, and it helped to me to allow us to be more collaborative and to be open to experimentation, because they didn't have the answers. So out of that, really quickly before we go to break, I used to always say to leaders, repeat after me. I don't know, but. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. I don't know, but let's contact this resource and ask them, right? So listen, look, I told you I was going to need some help staying on task here. I've got to take us to a quick break, and then we'll come back. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm having too much fun here. You have been listening to IBGR.network, known as the International Business Growth Radio Network. We'll be back after this short break with my friends, Eric Ethington and Matt Zako. All right, thanks. Welcome back. You're listening to IBGR.network, known as the International Business Growth Radio Network. I'm your host, Crystal Davis, here on the Lead Lean Show, where we talk operations. And today I'm just like a kid in a candy store. I'm getting to reflect on some memories, getting to talk about things that I absolutely love, I'm very passionate about. And I get to do it with two wonderful people, Matt Zako and Eric Ethington. I'm trying to be intentional in switching up whose name I say first. So welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Matt's probably having some elementary school moments where he's like, why do I always have to go last?
We're keeping track here.
I know, right? So we ended the last segment for those of you that are listening to this on LinkedIn, we're on live radio, but we ended the last segment actually on something that is very, very important. You talked about the two teams, the leadership team and the working team, and they're on the same journey, but having very different experiences. And you mentioned several things that I want us to spend a little time breaking down. You talked about leaders, well, everyone acknowledging that it's uncomfortable. And so that need to be vulnerable. That's one thing we want to touch on. You talked about the significant role that HR can play in the transformation. Often HR and accounting are the two teams that come in like 3 to 5 years later, right? And they need to be in there year one. And then you talked about the importance of career path, how a lot of lean resources, or not just lean resources, people that have been through transformations oftentimes end up, moving on to another company. And organizations really should understand the importance of the breadth of knowledge, the totality of the business knowledge that those folks have gained that could benefit the organization, future forward. So those are the three things I want to break down in our last segment. So you pick where you want to start, and then let's go deeper, and I can ask you some questions about that.
I was thinking about if we could start with just, the leadership not having to have all the answers. I think about just stories, whether it's going back to Delphi days or whether it's, post Delphi for all of us. Crystal, our paths crossed at some orchestrated company partnership meetings and stuff. And when we, one of the key things in lean is getting the leadership out to the Gemba, right?
Yes.
And that actually can be kind of a daunting thing for the leadership, and it's not taking anything away from their capabilities. But when you sometimes go out into we'll say the manufacturing area, if it's complete chaos, it's really hard for leadership to figure out where to engage. Okay.
That's right.
And so I sometimes use, it's almost like building an arch, and it's like, you can't just build it from one side all the way around to the other side. You got to start with two foundations and let them help support each other. And I feel like that there needs to be some work out in the Gemba that is being done to make normal and abnormal look different, so that when leadership does come to engage, they have some places to focus too. And so that's why one of the other things that we haven't even mentioned, we do talk about in the book having a system architect that helps pull all of this stuff together. And that's where like a system architect can be very helpful, is can we get some stuff going in the Gemba, and now we can get leadership exposed to that stuff, and let's see if we can get these two things to work together.
Oh no, that's very critical. Very critical. I played that role at a company before I went independent, and it was the power of the role. I found Eric was making not only that place for the leader to come on the Gemba, but making that connection to the top line, which is another thing that you guys did brilliantly in the book. Helping that leader to be able to translate those top line financials, those top line metrics to what they're seeing in the Gemba, and be able to lead lean in that way, not leading from, say, the Gemba up. Matt, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think on that note, another important role in all this is, in addition to HR, is the finance or controller person also is a key role. I think a place to start in all this actually is, what's in it for me, or what's the value in all of this? And, the reason we use the example in the book, which by the way was a real example that we, had to, normalize a little bit. So we couldn't use the exact data, but the results were the same. And, in the book, the value in doing all this work, engaging a team up front, the organization effectively invested about $500,000 over, between people, extra people time, some die design changes, and what the payback was over, it was almost $6 million. It was about 5.6 million, $600,000, and you got about 5.5 million payback. So it was 9x payback over the life cycle of that product. So that's the value in doing that, and that's why you need to engage with the controller early on as well, or the finance person, right? Because you're asking for money up front to do more work that isn't budgeted for, but you're gonna, say, hey, trust me, over the next X number of years, we're gonna get this back. And it can be done with, and we demonstrate that in the book, a way to do that with the operational cost, life cycle cost model, and some other means. So that's important to do because, again, people are busy. No one is raising their hand saying, I want to do more work. There's this development death spiral that we talk about as well, where, you're too busy launching the poorly designed process right now. And, you've missed your launch date. The customers are breathing down your neck. They want more output. And you don't have time to go to that meeting to talk about the next generation process, right? That where you want to do this work. So everyone deals with that, and there are ways out of it. But again, the payback is so big here. And that's what we're also just trying to show with the story is, by engaging people and empowering people, right? That social aspect, it's a win-win for everybody, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to touch a little bit more on the career path. So I always, when I talk to leaders, I always talk to them about this war for talent, particularly right now during the Great Resignation. And having, been in that position where I was, CI lead, felt like I did a really great job. But those opportunities, to move out of that role just didn't come around. So what would you say to CI people now who are in organizations making transformations? How would you advise them to engage either with HR or their leaders to talk about what an effective career path might be?
These are some thoughts, but they're going to be completely biased about me. Okay, but I can speak from,
me too.
From experience.
From experience.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
There are what I'll call like the parallel paths. So, some organizations, if you've gone to a certain point in the technical lean, CI type role, they make an opportunity for you to be like a plant manager or some high level ops manager. And that could be, if that is what you like to do and want to do, I know a lot of people personally who took that route and that worked for them. A couple other things to think about is there in the organization the ability to continue to stay in the technical lean continuous improvement role, but move up? If you remember at Delphi, we had a few divisional roles like that. Right. And that gives, because there are some people that this is actually their comfort zone. They're great at this problem solving. They're okay with the ambiguity of kind of leading without any authority. We're gonna convince, we're gonna train, we're gonna teach, we're gonna draw people in. And so there's some people that like that. And so that's another thing to think about. And then I guess the third thing I would add in is if you might exercise some patience as these things happen, as long as you're still like being challenged and learning. I think that is what kept a lot of us going over the years, is we were in an incredible learning environment. It was a tough company and a tough industry with tough customers and, and all of that. Right. But we still stuck around for it. Right. But part of it was that we were just like learning like really great
like
stuff.
A sponge.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very powerful. Matt, anything to add there?
Well, I think if you bring it back to the 6Con model too, if you start at the end, like continuous improvement, you can work your way upstream with, because different skill sets. So like the confirm piece, like doing machine qualifications and, with suppliers, with equipment, all that requires different skill sets that can be evolved and developed over time. So you can follow that same, you can go in reverse, I think, with those lenses to create a career path for that.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one other thing that I thought about in the story. Had I known what I know now, I would have talked to HR about soft skill training, helping me with effective, active listening, helping me with communication, learning about presence, influence, how to talk to leaders that are more focused on top line, have short attention spans, maybe elevator pitches right, versus the folks at the gimbal. So I think that's another thing that I would probably advise to some career CI folks. So we have just a minute and 45 minutes left on the radio, and then we can keep talking here. But let me kind of wrap things up for folks. So Matt and Eric, let's tell the folks how they can reach you really quickly, and then we'll continue here on LinkedIn and let some folks know some different things. So Eric?
Probably, I don't know, Matt, if you'd agree, but we do have a website. It's thepowerofprocess.solutions. And there's some of these concepts are out there. We've been messing around with video scribes and some other ways of communicating these. And so I'd suggest people go poke around there. And there's an ability to contact us directly there.
Awesome. The power of process.solutions. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So those of you on IBGR.network, it has been a pleasure, always my pleasure, to come before you every Tuesday to present some knowledge. Eric and Matt, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I hope you had a good time doing this and sharing. And you can also get the book on Amazon and productivitypress.com. And what else? I think that's it, right, guys?
I think that covers it all.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasing pleasure to be with you on this Tuesday. Come back and join us next Tuesday, 2 p.m. for the Lead Lean Show with your host, Crystal Y. Davis. You've been listening to IBGR.network. Have an amazing week.